Thank you guys all for coming. This is a really interesting topic that I think, unlike some of the other discussions here, really applies to everyone in the room. By some estimates, we touch our phone 2,600 times a day. We check it every 12 minutes, and we spend about 5 hours looking at our device. So Till, you're a clinical psychologist. Is addiction really the right word to use for that behavior? Is the evidence there from, an academic perspective to really call it tech addiction? Is that the right word?
I'm not sure that it is really tech addiction, although the WHO have now got a disorder called internet gaming disorder, which is an addiction. But there is a bit of a moral panic. Clearly, lots of people are using their phones all the time. They're using the internet, various things on the internet all the time. But even if you're a gamer, are you just an enthusiastic gamer? Or are you really somebody who's negatively affected? And I think there is some evidence for a very small group of people who have lots of negative consequences from actually using the internet too much of the time. And maybe that's already related to a pre-existing mental health problem. So it may be because they have anxiety or depression or ADHD or obsessive-compulsive disorder. Or maybe for a few people, there are some negative consequences of using the internet a lot. And I suspect it's a circular argument that there are vulnerable people who end up having negative consequences, and people have negative consequences which impacts on their mental health.
So we don't really have the causation or the correlation there, right? You might be sad, so you look at your phone, or you might be sad because you're looking at your phone, and we haven't really untangled that.
Absolutely not.
Michael, I think you have a really interesting background, because before you developed a meditation app, you created a very, maybe addictive, or kids loved this game called Moshi Monsters online, and then you really shifted to something different. Did you, think about when you were creating Moshi Monsters how to get people to spend more time? Did you think about, some of the things that maybe are now leading people to use something like Calm?
Yes, so Moshi Monsters and Calm could not be more different. Very, very different worlds. But what we tried to do with Moshi Monsters was create a fun experience for kids without making it something that they would spend hours and hours on. So it was about very light touches, dipping in and out of the world we created. And one thing we were very proud of was the educational angle. We called it stealth education, to help kids use technology to learn and play games while they're doing it, because there is all this bashing going on of technology and the mobile phone. And I agree, it feels like there's this moral panic, but I'm a huge believer in it. It brings so much joy and benefit to society. Our phones can be used negatively, or they can be used incredibly positively, and that's down to us. And so that's one of the things we're trying to do at Calm, is arm people in the age of attention. Attention is the most valuable asset in the world, and these huge companies are fighting for it. How can we arm ourselves with the tools to use our technology more mindfully, so we use it for us and not against us?
So your argument is basically we can use more tech to kind of solve this problem, right? And I mean, I think the conversations around technology addiction, usually, the words are unplug, put your phone away, can you go to dinner and put your phone in your bag and not take it out? But your attitude is kind of like, maybe we can use the technology to meditate or to do other sorts of things. And, that's a really incongruent argument for a lot of people, and I want to hear you make it. What is the pitch for Calm? Why should I download another app when the problem is that I spend too much time on my apps?
Yeah, so technology is not the problem. The smartphone is not the problem. The smartphone is a tool, and it's how we use it that matters. So this is why meditation has been around for thousands of years. It's a very valuable, simple, but powerful skill, and it gives people the opportunity, I believe, to make better choices. It allows you to sharpen your consciousness and your attention. So instead of whipping out your phone mindlessly, like so many of us do, like dopamine-addled zombies as we walk down the street or we wait in a queue, we have a pause, a fraction of a second, to decide, do we need to do that now? Or can we wait? Can we chat to someone next to us? Can we daydream? Can we get into a flow state? And that's why I think meditation is such a valuable skill. And there are many apps, very valuable apps, that can help people learn that skill.
Till, you actually have evaluated some of the apps that are for mental health that are out there now, and you're developing an online tool to help people who are struggling with schizophrenia. So you've looked at a lot of these, apps and tools that are supposed to be for mental health. And what do you think? Do you think that they're working? Do you think that they can be beneficial? What is your kind of response to that when you hear, an app like Calm that is, saying that can really help us?
Okay, well, I noticed that what Michael said was he believed that this app will provide positive benefit. I'm really keen to see the evidence for positive benefit, and the evidence isn't the number of stars in an app store. The benefit is when you do a proper randomized controlled trial, you know how many people will benefit. For people with a mental health problem, it's really important because we need to know not how many people it benefits, but also how many people it fails. Because if you're a person who failed, and then you think that it should have benefited you, then actually you feel much worse after using it. So there are, 78,000 health apps that were added to the app stores last year. And there were blue ones and yellow ones and green ones. We have no idea whether a blue one was better, a yellow one was better, or a green one was better, because people state that they're doing things, just like Calm improves meditation, but how do we know? And it's really up to responsible developers to actually go out there and get the data, or to help other people get the data, and maybe have a kind of step back a little before endlessly launching month by month new apps which actually may not work. And the whole panoply of them in the app stores is really quite overwhelming for anybody, let alone somebody who wants to develop resilience.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. Sairah, I know that you did a master's thesis about people's expectation about privacy, and one thing that I think really differentiates so-called technology addiction from gambling or other forms of behavioral addictions is that it's really personalized. You see something really specific because you told the algorithm that you wanted to see that, or my Facebook feed is not like your Facebook feed, and it's optimized for us to spend as much time there as possible. What is like the data and the privacy element of all of this? Because the slot machine is not necessarily collecting your personal data the way that your Facebook app is or your Twitter app is.
There's a huge obligation from tech companies now to let you know what they're doing with your data, I think. And we're going through this big transitional period where we're becoming more literate in terms of what it feels like to live online. And in that context, there is a huge distinction, I think, between addiction and developing healthy habits. And the tech businesses are now waking up to the fact that they have to help us in that endeavor. So the endless scroll and having stopping cues and all those things are really important. From a privacy perspective, obviously in the UK we've got GDPR now. Although I notice, like everybody else, that when you go online, they're just telling you now that they're tracking you. They're not telling you exactly what they're doing with your data unless you dig around. They don't necessarily make that as easy as it could be. And I think that's what we want. My research would say most people are not averse to sharing their data. They just want to know exactly where it's going to sit, what's happening to it, and whether they can have access to that too.
So, Michael, I'm hearing from both Sairah and Till that there needs to be more transparency in data. So my question to you, from developers, my question to you is, would you be open to sharing Calm data with someone like Till or another psychology researcher who wanted to really see what the benefits would look like?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there is tremendous responsibility that developers have to not make false claims, to properly research, evidence-based research, the products that they're putting out there. So we have an insane amount of data on our 35 million users, how often they meditate, what time of day they go to sleep, on and on and on. And I think using that in intelligent ways with researchers and scientists is something we'd love to do.
And to do that to more than just make the app better?
To make the world better. If it makes Calm better, great, but our mission is to make the world a happier and healthier place. And we are, I think, in the golden age of mental health. It's gone from being something no one talked about to something everyone is starting to talk about, and about time. And we should be treating our minds with the same care and respect we do our bodies. So yeah, the more we can research this, the better.
What do you think about that, Till?
Well, I'm very pleased that data can be shared. The problem is it's not the right kind of data, so there do need to be proper scientific studies rather than just collecting the back end of the software. what I do think is that it would be really useful for app stores to step up here as well, because we need responsible developers, but we need app stores to think that if they're curating health apps, then we need some evidence that they are a health app, that they're doing things to benefit our health. And I think that they need to step up now and provide at least what I've called transparency for trust principles, so something on privacy and security, which isn't hidden in 28 pages of terms and conditions. They only want to know 3 things about users, want to know what data is collected, whether it's safe, and who is using it. And we need to know about how the app was developed. We need to know about efficacy, and we need to know about dosing in the app. And I think all of that information should be provided by developers at the point of sale. So effectively, when you download the app in an app store, we should be given that information so that we can balance up. Because as Sairah said, some people will say, OK, we'll agree to share data if we know the benefits are high.
There needs to be a drug label for apps almost.
So that you can weigh it up, but it needs to be information which people understand, not legalese within a long set of terms and conditions which nobody is going to wade through.
Which has been one of the biggest complaints about GDPR, is that it's just another notice for you to wave away.
Yeah, we turned the GDPR legislation into a sleep story within the Calm app because it's so weighty and boring, it helps people fall asleep. So, and hopefully some people listened to it and took it on board.
I would say, though, from an app development point of view, designers, user experience designers, have been constantly on a mission to remove friction.
Right, where's the incentive for them to make something that explains how your data is being collected clearly? That's the exact opposite of what they want to do.
But now I think the argument is reversed, in that there is a very strong argument for creating moments of friction, and to be able to do that in more unusual and interesting ways, as opposed to a pop-up that says, did you get it? Now I've got your data.
Yeah. Till, as someone who works in clinical psychology, I'm curious, are you hearing more from patients or hearing more from practitioners about the role that technology is playing in people's lives and in their disorders? Is that coming up more?
I think it comes up more in terms of the potential for digital to actually improve people's lives. The problem is we're thinking about it in 2 different ways. So there's in a way which is self-management, so that you're effectively making the person responsible for their own mental health. Now, we do have to take some responsibility, but the main part of that I think is in blended care, so that the app can provide a stepping stone into healthcare and then out of healthcare again, so out of mental health care in particular. So it is being talked about, not being talked about very much in terms of the addiction element. I think the internet gaming disorder, which the WHO launched in June this year, is exactly the frictionless system which at least in Asian countries, more than, in fact, in the Western countries.
And that's that's 10 hours of World of Warcraft a day or something.
Yes.
That's a very narrow subset, and I feel like we kind of extrapolate and say that that's everyone, whereas it's really not the case.
Yeah. And also, it seems to be now there are loot boxes. It's much more like gambling. And maybe we should think about it as a gambling disorder. We have treatments for gambling disorders. We have treatments for OCD and ADHD, both of which are associated with being in tech. And perhaps just the way in which this is providing environment so that you can see people actually exposing themselves to tech, having increased symptoms, is just another way that we can see it, rather than them, somebody with OCD having a problem leaving their house because they have to check the lights 20,000 times before they can go. And the similar thing, they tend to go onto the internet and do the same thing over and over again, checking things over and over again, and perhaps it's just
refreshing
another behavioral
Instagram
environment.
Feed.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing I wonder is what you guys think about some of the solutions that have started rolling out. Now every week on my iPhone, I get told how much time I spent looking at my iPhone on average per day, and that's kind of a little thing, and sometimes I don't really look at that. It's kind of hard to tell whether that's making an impact, and what do you guys think about those solutions? Michael, you think that's helpful to have a notification like that?
I think it is, yeah. I think big tech is starting to take its responsibilities seriously. I think 2017 felt like a watershed year where the thousands of people on the other side of the screen who are obsessed with tweaking every single little detail, A/B testing everything to keep our attention on these apps for as long as possible, have recognized that breaks at a certain level. So baked into the OS of many of the, Google and Facebook made a big announcement recently about tracking our usage. I think that's a really positive thing. It's not going to solve everything, but having data as a user, being able to take a bit more responsibility for our own use on these devices, I think is a positive step.
I think as well that people have associated the internet a bit like alcohol becoming an addiction. If it was similar to alcohol, that a few vulnerable people end up having a problem, then that assumes that there will be some regulation coming. There will be some advice about what's the safe standard.
Right, we have a drinking age, right?
Exactly. You have a drinking age, and you have the number of units you're allowed to have before you drive a car. People can refuse to give you a drink if they think that you're drunk. So those sorts of things could be put into tech in a way, and I think it is useful to be told how long you spent on your phone, but I've realized that it doesn't. It tells you how much time I spend on my phone, and how much time I spent on my iPad, but I don't add them together to find out how much tech time I actually spent on in a week on the internet.
Right, because there's no regulation, there's no onus on anybody. Apple is doing this voluntarily because they thought it was something their users wanted, and I do wonder if voluntary measures like that are ever going to be enough. And I do think they're doing that to kind of get around regulation. Is like, look, we're already self-regulating. We don't need to do anything else.
But I think you have to think of it as more of an ecosystem. So it's interesting that you've got different companies now. I think Daimler's an example where they say when you're on holiday, your out-of-office reply will say that you're not taking emails and they'll be deleted. And so in terms of building up healthy habits, we can help ourselves. The people that we work with and for can help us, and the tech developers and companies can help us. And I feel like you want a multifaceted approach to just help us get used to technology being in the world and us being more in control of it rather than the other way around.
Yeah, I think there's not going to be one solution from one company here. Well, thank you guys so much. This was really great.
Thank you.